Hello, hello. We are live. It is me, Salome Siboney, co-founder of The Black Sheep, and I'm going live today to discuss a very interesting study that has severe implications for the black sheep among us, which is Americans are becoming more conformist than ever before within these last 20 years. And it's not a good thing. So let me get this article up because I want to share it with you all. And I am also streaming on Instagram, on X, on YouTube, and on Substack. So if you are in one of those places, please bear with me because multiple platforms means I cannot have eyes on everybody's questions and comments at the same time. And let me remind you, as I pull up this fascinating study, to subscribe to The Black Sheep and become a member over there so that you know when I'm going live and so that we can have some fun. Now, let's see. All right, here we go. Let me get this study going. I just feel like I'm going to be such a different kind of streamer. You know, I'm not a very, I'm not like a gaming streamer. I'm not going to be shouting. I'm not going to be doing all the crazy fast talking. I'm not going to be starting fights for drama, or maybe I will. Let's see. Oh, it's not working on YouTube. Okay. Let me, I need my technical person because I am not the technical person that figures all this out. What's going on YouTube? Oh, it looks like there's a lag. Yeah. Okay. All right. So this study is called Changes in Need for Uniqueness from 2000 to 2020. Very excited to share this study. It's super cool. I will, if I did not, I will link it on the Black Sheep on Substack so you can see it there. But I'm going to read it to y'all. So let's have a little reading time. Let me read something to you all. Gather around. All right. So here it says, a recent study published in Collabra Psychology has found a notable decline in people's motivation to stand out or be unique over the last 2 decades. Researchers analyzed data from over 1 million people between 2000 and 2020, measuring various aspects of uniqueness, including willingness to defend beliefs, adherence to rules, and concern over others' reactions. Results revealed declines across all 3 areas. So let's pause and break that down because this wording is a little wonky. The decline was not in adherence to rules. The decline was in willingness to, or the discomfort rather with not adhering to rules. So we are more concerned with adhering to rules. We are more concerned with others' reactions to us, and we are less willing to defend our beliefs. So all of this is probably not news to you because if you follow my work and if you are a reader of The Black Sheep, you already know that people are becoming way more conformist than previous times that we can compare to. I remember a time when someone said, i.e. Destiny. I'm just saying. We're not going to be doing any of that. God rest his soul. He doesn't seem to be doing well. And I want everybody to do well. And I don't want them to harass other people because they're not doing well. I want them to do well. So moving on, you have probably noticed this increase in conformity because you are not one of the people who is doing the conformity. And so if you're like me, kind of a black sheep figure who is a little bit sensitive to that pressure to conform that gets applied to you, you've noticed that it's becoming increasingly hard to just have normal conversations where you express differences of opinions because people are becoming less tolerant of those differences of opinions, and thus people are becoming less likely, less willing to express their opinions. It's this vicious cycle that is put into motion by people that use these antisocial tactics to raise the cost of being an authentic person, saying your opinion, disagreeing, Now these things that are kind of uncomfortable always, but we had created a culture that allowed for us to do these things in productive ways without putting such high penalties on it, that is receding. And this is a very bad thing for a lot of things. It's not just unpleasant. It also makes it very hard to live in a pluralistic society where people do have differences of opinions, where people do have different preferences, and where people do want to live entirely different lifestyles. So what we end up having here is a situation where the culture becomes increasingly intolerant of normal human life in a free society, which is having different opinions, making different choices. And so what we do instead to cope with that is what this study shows. Become more conformist, become more concerned with the reactions of others, and try harder to follow the rules. We'll have to figure out what the rules, quote unquote, is in reference to, like which rules. Are they talking about just like legal rules, social rules? Because a lot of these things, like during the pandemic of 2020, there were some rules that were kind of silly, like you can't walk on the beach. And so are those the kind of rules that we're getting more uncomfortable with challenging? Because if so, that's bad for our society. Because a healthy society is one that has that interplay between people that have some ideas and people that have other ideas. Because the people with some ideas might say, nobody should go outside, it is dangerous, don't even walk on the beach, we don't know enough to know if that's okay. And then another person might say, I think there might be more harm done if we lock everybody in their house for a year and don't even let them walk along the beach. There might be more impacts that come down the line because of what we're trying to avoid in the short term, right? And so we have that interplay where different ideas can clash in a productive way, and it allows us to figure out what is true. But if people are too afraid and uncomfortable of the consequences of disagreeing, then we don't get that interplay. And so we end up stagnating, and bad ideas enforced by people who just happen to be the ones in the enforcer position, or the people who are more antisocial and are willing to attack anyone that disagrees with them. These are the people that then get to influence culture. And that's not good. So let's move on with the study. So it says, the new study was motivated by evidence suggesting that people are increasingly concerned about the social consequences of expressing opinions, particularly in online spaces where scrutiny is often harsh and widespread. Polling data and past research suggested that fear of isolation or criticism might make people more cautious about sharing beliefs or acting in ways that draw attention. At the same time, rising social anxiety and sensitivity to judgment could make people more hesitant to express uniqueness in ways perceived as confrontational or outside social norms. Given these shifts, the researchers wanted to track whether and how people's desire for uniqueness had changed over a 20-year period. And so one of the study's author, Bill Chopik, an associate professor of psychology at Michigan State University, says, people have varied perceptions of and opinions about social media. However, one thing everyone seemed to agree on is that you need to be incredibly careful about what you're posting. It might be best to keep quiet and not stick out too much. There's also a lot of public polling where people are afraid of expressing opinions that are too controversial. In some polls, over 70% of people say they self-censor online. They also think that this fear is damaging public discourse and harming our ability to exchange ideas freely. Part of these observations speaks to people's ability to be unique and authentically express themselves. Okay, so let's pause and reflect on that a little bit. And I will be paying attention to the questions and the comments. I will try to dip into them and respond as I see them. But I think what's interesting about this is the bringing up of social media, because I think any study that doesn't consider the implications of social media to conformity is not complete. And this is something that I've been saying for a long time, which is that I believe that social media as it is now is an inherently collectivist technology in some ways. There's not that much room for individuality in some regards. Like, you can be individual, right? You're totally free to put out what you want, to say what you want, to do what you want in those ways. But there's also this intense algorithmic pressure as well as social pressure to use the right language, to be on trend, and very much to even just like form your thoughts and voice them in ways that are palatable and recognizable to other people on social media. It's incredible, actually. Like, I don't even know. It's its own thing in the way. It's its own thing to think about how much the way social media works right now teaches us to think about how other people perceive us and how we can express ourselves in ways that match the current trends of self-expression. And so, this is what you get with kind of like the TikTok trends and like the trending audio on Instagram and the engagement bait on X. All of these things have their own ways of kind of tapping into your desire to be popular and successful on the platform, which is understandable, but doing it by conforming to what is already popular and successful on the platforms. And so in some ways, it's very much the antithesis of what you would do as like an artist or an innovator, which is to look and say, what's missing? What are people not doing? What could be different about this? Rather, these social media platforms often do the opposite. It's explicit advice by a lot of social media marketers to look at what other people are doing and copy it. Just do what other people are doing. And I'm not knocking that because that works. That is the correct advice. The thing is that, are we mindful enough about what is happening when we take that advice, when we almost start to internalize the fact that success means conforming to what is currently popular? There's something tricky there. I don't know if we're totally conscious of that. And the younger you are using the platforms, the less you're going to be conscious of that. The more it's going to be this kind of like vibes, just like vibes of like, oh, this is what's taking off. Okay, I'm going to make videos like that. That's not the same as being a social media marketer that's thinking through, okay, like, so this is the trending audio. Okay, so let's sell our product by matching it with the trending audio. Like, you've got that distance, you're doing business. When you're a child and you're very much conflating your sense of self-worth with popularity on these platforms, the mechanism by which you gain that popularity is to conform, for the most part, to what is already popular on the platforms. It's explicit. And this is fascinating because it also mimics what happens offline, right? It's not like this is totally new, the fact that humans have a desire to conform, and that oftentimes we perceive success as something we will gain by conforming to what those who are successful already are doing. That's not new. We already do that. Like, that's already the middle school phenomenon of like, oh wow, the cool girl has a purple bow in her hair. I need to get a purple bow because that's what the cool girl has. Oh no, the cool guy, he has this color backpack and that's the cool thing to do. So I got to do that if I want to be cool. That is a very normal experience, and it's a particularly common experience for young children who are figuring out who they are through mimicry. That's normal. It's healthy. The thing that I wonder is like, is it healthy when it comes through on like steroids via social media, where everything is amplified times 100, and when you fail to conform properly, and perhaps there's negative consequences for that, the negative consequences are like the entire world makes fun of you. that is a potentially real consequence of not fitting in, not doing the trends right, not saying the words right, not using the latest language for something, having an opinion that people thought was bad or wrong. It's, you get like harassed by countless faceless people on end. So the pressure to conform online is potentially also way more intense because of that than it might be where you're just concerned about your peer group. So let's move on a little bit down this study. So the researcher says, we sensed that people thought this was a relatively recent phenomenon, but we thought it'd be good to formally test if people are concerned about these things, i.e. standing out, being unique, and if it is a relatively recent concern or something that's always existed. For their study, the researchers conducted a large-scale analysis of survey data from over 1.3 million participants who completed the Need for Uniqueness questionnaire as part of the Gosling-Potter Personality Project between 2000 and 2020. This survey, conducted annually, gathered data from thousands to hundreds of thousands of respondents each year, predominantly in the US, providing a robust data set for identifying trends. So, the survey measured 3 distinct facets of uniqueness: lack of concern for others' opinions, willingness to break rules, and tendency to defend personal beliefs publicly. I love this stuff. So what I'm going to do, if you're joining in now, we're going through a study about predominantly of Americans that shows there is a 20-year high in conformity. People are more concerned and afraid to stand out than they ever have been from 20 years ago. And I'm going to discuss how this relates to the black sheep concept as well, because more than ever, when conformity becomes the norm, you also know that there's going to be less tolerance for those that don't conform. And so that becomes a whole problem, and that is why I started the black sheep, because it's the people that don't want to, or straight up just like can't easily conform, that are the canary in the coal mine when your culture starts becoming conformist. Guys, can you give me a sign that you see me? Because it's looked like it's freezing on my end, and I just want to make sure I'm not talking to myself, even though that is something I want to do. Let me look at this. All right. Let's get some comments going here. Let's get some interactions so I know, because I feel like I'm frozen on Instagram. It's showing me frozen on Instagram, and I don't know if, okay, you see, okay, thank you, because I'm looking at a frozen screen cap of myself, and I'm like, that's better not be what they're seeing. Okay, let me go back really quick, because I know you guys have left some comments that I want to answer. One person said, I had this conversation a while ago with my friend about how quote unquote trends are unavoidable and predictable and have been around forever. And while I agree with her, I wasn't able to properly express my, with social media trends and conformity is basically the issue I have. You're right. It's anti-artist, and that's why I'm so bothered by it. Right. So this is the thing. It's like, it's normal to trend. It's normal to have people that all coalesce around a thing, and it's like, we like the thing. You can see this throughout history also. Like, that's why there's distinct periods of style, right? Like the 60s, the 70s, the 80s, the 90s. Like, there were trends that were unique to all of these times. And that's fine. And often that's because someone started the trend, right? Which is in its own way, a nonconformist thing to do, is to be the one that starts something new, and then the trend catches on. But my concern with how it works on social media is that, like, it's a little less, the thing with social media is that everything is turned up to 100. And everything happens so quickly that I don't think we have enough distance and like take that processing time to relate to things in a healthier way. So with the way that trends happen on social media, they come and go within a week. Do you guys remember, what was it that everybody was saying? Like, I am so demure, I am so mindful, or whatever. And it was just like, for a week, even the White House put out like some little joke. I think it was like a White House tweet or something. It was like, at the White House, we are demure. I don't know. It was something like this. And it was just like, wow, this is incredible. I just like, it fascinates me that we have the ability now for something to pick up and trend so widespread, so rapidly. And then it's gone that quickly too. That is so unprecedented. And so you can imagine that, like, just a cursory thought of like, what are the implications of trends happening on such a short cycle, when in the past trends like marked a decade. It was like bell bottoms are trending for a decade, you know? So it's like, now it's like this phrase trended for a week. What does that do to our brains? How do we deal with an environment that changes so rapidly? And knowing that humans have that desire to keep up with the trends, that we're kind of, and for better or for worse, it's not, I don't demonize trends as a concept, because I could imagine like some evolutionary utility in trends where it was like, oh, Billy Bob over there, my neighbor caveman, he's using some kind of cudgel to open up shells. That looks pretty cool. I'm gonna try that out. And then you try it, it works. And then some other caveman neighbor is like, oh, what is Timmy Tom doing over there with his cudgel? I wanna try that. That's a trend. Like, something new that everybody's like, hey, this looks like it's working. This looks cool. I'm gonna try that. Let's all try it. That's a trend. And if it's good, great. Something that works spreads through the population and people get the benefit of it. If it's something that's bad, not so good. And there are plenty of examples of that as well. But that's where nonconformity comes in. That's the importance of having that balance between those that want to conform to the trends, because that may be beneficial, and those that choose not to conform, perhaps because it's genuinely bad or just because they don't want to. But the fact that they have the freedom not to conform creates this varied landscape that allows people to have that sense of, I don't have to do this. And it's not going to apply some serious consequence if I don't keep up with this new trend. And when I say trend, it doesn't have to be something like, oh, I put a bow in my hair and it's the new thing. It can be very much like the language people are using, the ideology people are adopting. All of these are trends as well. When people were posting the black square in 2020, that was a trend. That is per the book. People adopted something, started doing it, and hopped on the bandwagon. It was a trending behavior, for better or for worse. I think it was for worse. I thought it was I don't think anybody was saved by a black square on somebody's Instagram. And I think there was a lot of pressure around that. And see, that's where the importance of like a culture that values its black sheep comes in. Because when you have such a conformist culture where people can't say, now why are we posting a black square to Instagram? Okay, in solidarity. And what does this solidarity actually do? Like, does this actually do anything for anybody? Oh, I don't think so. Okay, maybe we should donate. Maybe we should do something else. Maybe we should demonize people who don't feel comfortable using their social media accounts for political gestures. So this kind of back and forth is what allows a culture to weed out bad ideas, and more importantly, perhaps, is weed out bad actors who are trying to push bad ideas by making it seem like no one disagrees, and that the only people who do disagree are absolute monsters, and you're not an absolute monster, right? You're going to post a black square. So this is the problem when a study like this comes out that tells us culture is becoming much more conformist, is that it becomes a culture where bad ideas are much more likely to flourish because there are much fewer people who are willing to push back on those bad ideas. So this stuff is like, it's really bad news. Humans already have a tendency to conform. You know, I know like there's a camp like that thinks, no, conformity is good, because we don't need a bunch of nonconformists running around trying to change everything and undo the traditions that have done well for us. Nonconformity doesn't mean that you can't choose to conform. It means that you can choose. And that is the thing that's so important, because not every single tradition actually is a good one. And the ability to buck tradition is it's the founding of the United States. Anyway, first of all, like, you know, I think it's kind of funny that there's a growing, like, camp of thought that's like, we need to return to tradition and conformity is good. And it's just like, oh my gosh, we're just going to keep having the same debates forever. No, it's nonconformity is very much at the heart of the American project in some ways. I mean, like the whole thing was this idea, like, we're not going to do what England is doing. We are not going to have a government that controls our rights. We're going to have rights be inalienable. And the government is merely going to be something that protects our rights. How about that? We're going to do this different. Nonconformity at the heart of this country. And so this idea that we need a conformist culture in order to stay together, I don't think that's true at all. I think that we need the freedom to choose how to conform, because humans are going to conform. Don't worry about it. I don't think we need to help people conform. That's usually not the problem. Okay, let me go through some more. Thank you. Pause Day movie, because you're making a lot of sense. I love that. I am so honored. Okay, let me make sure I'm not missing anything. Comment from Anna. It's weird, though, because trends are also a way to monetize. I think once our opinions became such an easy way to make money on social media, it really opened up a crazy world. Girl, let me tell you how crazy that world is. I can talk about that forever. Because the thing about it is that, like, I believe we've all become the media. And it's funny because Elon Musk recently posted on X and was like, you are the media now. And I'm like, yeah, you know, I get it. And I like that energy of, you know, the media being kind of like a decentralized open source system by which people say, hey, okay, here's the news story. Well, here's my version. Here's my angle on it. Well, here's this angle. Well, this person said this. Well, this person said this. Well, what about this? You know, like, it's a very beautiful, messy, organic process of arriving at the truth by allowing this cacophony of different perspectives to all kind of like sort each other out and have the truth then rise to the top. It's so human. It's actually so human. And it's why I am a libertarian, because I actually believe in humans being free to do things that we can, in the right environments, do completely on our own. We don't need to have like a ministry of truth to help us figure out what's true by removing the false information, because they know the false information. You don't know, but they know. I'm not into that. And so the thing is, though, that statement, you are the media, is like a double-edged sword. So on the one hand, yes, we have this decentralized information ecosystem, which is amazing and important. But on the other hand, now we're all prey to the very same ills that we who distrust the mainstream media have turned away from it for, which is engagement bait, rage bait, cutting corners with information, trying to lead only with the thing that is beneficial to you and leaving out what is not, demonizing the people that have a different view on your preferred information and your preferred narrative. It's all there. You can see the whole thing developing again in this decentralized space. But because it's decentralized, no one can force other people into their sinking ship, right? If you want to be the influencer on social media who lies and who whips up tribalism and who demonizes anybody that questions the narrative that you're pushing, great. Go do that over there. people will hopefully eventually see this person's getting stuff wrong, and this person kind of doesn't seem like they're actually looking for the information that's true. And there's this other person over here who gives the whole picture and who lets me know when they've made mistakes and who seems like they really want to get to the truth. I'm going to go over there. And so that's the beauty of a decentralized system, is that it allows for competition, and then it allows for people to choose different things, which most often times people choose the thing that is going to be somewhat better in some way, even though it often takes time. It's not the most perfect solution. It's not the most perfect system. But when you have a situation where the information a population gets is owned by only one source, that is a much more dangerous situation than, oh my gosh, so many different opinions, so many people getting it wrong. Well, at least there's a chance to get it right. So, okay. I do, yeah. So in short, we are all becoming the media for better and for worse. And with the monetization on social media, you can kind of see this like ramp up. It's like constantly like everybody has to outdo each other, which leads to this need to have like more extreme opinions in some way. You know, it's like, it's not satisfying for people to just be like, I think that I don't have a really great position on immigration. I'm not super sure one way or the other. I think maybe we should be concerned about, open border situation. That's probably not the best. But at the same time, I think that, it's good and very American to allow people to enter in and contribute in ways that help them and help their society. So there should be a system for that as well. Like, that's kind of a boring opinion in the land of social media, where it's much more exciting and outrageous to be like, open the borders, let everybody in, and you're a terrible racist if you say anything otherwise. Or the other extreme of that opinion, which is like, they're coming in and they're killing us all, and we must send the military to the border right now, or they're going to be at your door. And like, whoa, what if we could have a normal middle ground conversation about this? But that's the thing, that's the entertainmentification of the media, which has nothing to do with social media in reality. That happened a long time ago with like the Rachel Maddows and the whatever people on the radio. A lot of that like entertainment news came through, and so that'd been a problem. Okay, let me get back to the article, and then I will come back to comments because I want to get to the actual findings. But there's just so much to say about this. So here we say, for example, a participant might rate statements like, I tend to express my opinions publicly regardless of what others say, or it is better to agree with others than to be considered disagreeable, to reflect their stances on defending beliefs and concern over others' reactions. Each facet's scores were then analyzed year by year, enabling the researchers to identify any significant changes over the 20-year period. The data showed a notable decrease in all three facets from 2000 to 2020, suggesting a shift towards greater conformity and self-censorship in social spaces. So let's see. I want to skip down here. The largest decline at 6.52% was in people's willingness to publicly defend their beliefs, signaling a significant change in how comfortable individuals feel about expressing their opinions. In 2000, survey responses indicated that people were generally more willing to stand by their viewpoints, even if controversial or different from popular opinion. By 2020, however, people were far less likely to express strong beliefs publicly. I wonder why that happened. I wonder why people became less willing to defend their beliefs publicly. I think perhaps it is the movements that swept through social media who utilized shame and social pressure to demonize anyone that dared to express a different opinion than those who were going to demonize them and use social pressure to outcast them. I remember seeing this happen on Tumblr back in the early days before I was on any other social media platforms, before any other social media platforms had really taken off yet. Tumblr was the spot. And I remember starting to see that kind of, it was so, it's so cool. Like, I wish I could time travel and go back to my younger self, like being on Tumblr, being like, what is going on here? You know, like early social media age, and just kind of observe and try to remember what it felt like to first be entering into this technological ecosystem by which you felt the presence of other people and you felt seen. You felt that you could be criticized at any time, even if you weren't at the computer. This was the crazy thing about social media, and it's still the crazy thing about social media, is that you are always available for public denunciation, even if you turned your phone off. And I know in some ways that's what people say is freeing. It's like, oh yeah, you're getting attacked online, turn your phone off. And it's like, yeah, that is actually real, because you're not in your phone and it really doesn't matter what people say about you online, because they can say things, but like, you're not going to be attacked. You know, you can be in your home, you can turn your phone off and just live. You could just live. And this in some ways is like, it's what celebrities have done. It's what politicians have done forever, because at a certain level of fame, people talk about you all the time when you are not there to respond, and they say whatever they want and you can't do anything about it. And you just have to live your life. And so now we're kind of all steadily being thrust into this weird environment. But unlike celebrities and politicians, a lot of people that are thrust into this environment where they are getting spoken about and defamed and denounced in this public online sphere, they might have a job they could lose. And oftentimes these people have gone after people's jobs, because, oh, I didn't like this thing you posted online 5 years ago. You shouldn't be able to work at the Home Depot, or, you know, this kind of stuff that happened and still does happen in some regards. And these are forces of conformity. So of course, if you have a technology that allows for a virtual mob to form and to cause real world consequences to you, well, of course, people are going to be less likely to defend their opinions in public. And so we have this, and this is super scary, right? Because this actually is the same kind of atmosphere that occurs in totalitarian regimes, like in Cuba, like in China, like in North Korea, in these places where you can face severe consequences for having the quote unquote wrong opinion, or simply being said to have the wrong opinion, which is even worse, because when you can face severe punishment for something you actually didn't do, for something that you've been accused of, then you have to self-censor and constantly perform the opposite. Every opportunity you have is used to prove that you're not the kind of person who would say X. So then you have people that don't actually believe in the thing, the ideology, the government, the whatever the thing is that they can't criticize. They don't actually believe in it. Oh, but they are zealous publicly saying how much they believe in it, because that's their defense against someone accusing them of not believing in it. It creates a terrible environment. And so a study like this that shows that we're less likely to defend our opinions publicly is not good news. So let's go down this article. The trend could indicate an increase in self-censorship, with individuals potentially fearing backlash, isolation, or criticism if their views differ from those of their peers or social circles. The researchers noted that this decline could be tied to the growth of social media platforms. I didn't read that part. I genuinely just deduced what was obvious from that before reading it, or I wouldn't have repeated it like that, where opinions are widely broadcasted and scrutinized, making individuals more cautious about sharing viewpoints that might be controversial. One thing we were a bit surprised by was how long ago some of these changes started, Chopik told SciPost. We saw that some of the effects, not defending beliefs publicly, for example, began as early as 2001, much before social media. So it confirms some thinking about online spaces, but it's otherwise a bit of a mystery why people are reticent to stand out. A related dimension, concern over how others perceive them, saw a 4-point 28% increase, meaning individuals increasingly reported caring about others' opinions. This change suggests that people have become more attuned to potential social consequences of their actions and opinions, driving them to prioritize fitting in over expressing unique or divergent perspectives. So, all bad news. All bad news. So I think that this is, though, very motivating for me to actually defend my beliefs in public. And so, you know, if you have been following me, you know that I posted my little, I don't love it, but I voted for Trump. Sorry to burst your bubble that I was whatever projection you wanted me to be, but this is the decision I made, and I have my reasons. Here they are. They are because I'm a libertarian. They're because I do not like a politician that used the rhetoric of price controls and promotes identity politics, and all these different things. And oh boy, did that make some people mad. And it wasn't that they were just going to share why they disagreed, but rather why I am a terrible person. And so this is the kind of thing that is just happening again and again. And it's no surprise that a study like this comes out and says, hey, people aren't comfortable sharing their beliefs anymore. People are worried about how others perceive them. And it's really interesting, though, like that this began as early as 2001. Now, I'd love you guys' opinion because 2001, where were we in 2001? What was going on? Because let me just look this up. I got a computer. I want to know when Tumblr was around, because I think that there was earlier social media like MySpace and stuff too, which I was on MySpace. And okay, so Tumblr was founded in 2007. 9/11. Wait, why are we saying 9/11? Are you guys joking that Tumblr is 9/11? Or are you saying that, 9/11 happened in 2001? Thank you. I did not sleep very much last night, so bear with me. Yeah, 9/11 happened in 9/11 happened in 2001. Very good point. So there you go. That was a situation where, as is very normal, when there's like a tragic national, international emergency, but particularly that kind of like an attack from the outside, you get that groupthink, herd mentality that takes over, which is, are you with us or are you against us? Oh my goodness. Like, I would love to have been a little bit more of an adult at that time, because what a fascinating psychological collective event to live through. I know that people have said that criticizing the war and trying to criticize, like, hey, what are we doing now? You're passing a bunch of like laws like the Patriot Act and stuff like this in response to this terrorist attack. And a lot of these things aren't actually related to the terrorist attack. Like, why do you need to keep to surveil American citizens because non-American citizens did a crime and against American citizens? You know, how is this actually related? You couldn't even do that, because there was just such an atmosphere of, you are either with us or you are against us. And now is not the time for questioning our government. You know, our government's going to keep us safe and this kind of thing that is just so dangerous, because it is exactly the kind of situation where people turn off the rational mind and less ethical leaders can take that as an opportunity to roll back freedoms, to push bad ideas, and to do so with very little pushback. I mean, I know, I don't know if you guys, here, I recommend, if you want some crazy American history, learn about President Wilson and the things that he did during the war. That man has to be one of the worst presidents that we ever had. I didn't even know this for a long time. You know, I went through all of my schooling and never learned anything about what Wilson did, but he was one of the most anti-free speech presidents, put people in jail for protesting the war. I believe for even criticizing the war, you could be have some kind of like charges brought up against you. So it's just like really, really suppressive environment in the service of this kind of like, no, the greater good is all of us supporting our government going to war. And hey, that could be correct. But the thing is, it doesn't become more correct because you threw the dissenters in jail. Either it's correct or it's not. And it's not going to damage the truth if people criticize it and they're wrong. If they're wrong, they're wrong. So, you know, that's just one of those little like telltale signs that, well, if you're right, why are you throwing the people that are wrong in jail for criticizing you? Like, aren't you right? So anyway, yeah, I think that is so fascinating that was the year that 9/11 happened, because somebody needs to send this author a little message, because he's like, it's a bit of a mystery why people are reticent to stand out, why this happened in 2001. 2001, like I've read things about how people look back on it and they were just like, the environment was crazy. It was such an instant sense of us versus them. And you know, there's something in that. It's not like all of these things have flecks of good and bad in them, because right, you'll have these situations where disasters happen and there's this sense of camaraderie where people pull together to help each other. And that can be helpful in the service of like, not allowing people to exploit a tragedy, right? Like people that want to loot businesses during a hurricane, or people that want to like go into somebody's houses while they're away because they fled the disaster, things like that. You know, when you have this kind of like collective energy where everybody's like, we're in this together, it's us against the hurricane, that's actually very healthy and beautiful in some ways. But then when you have it come out with something very complex like 9/11, where it's like, you're with us or you're against us, no, because we need those people to say, hold on, how does the Patriot Act stop 9/11? You know, hold on. Why is this person being told they can't criticize you for sending Americans to potentially die in a war overseas? Like, there's a lot going on here. We need to slow down and actually discuss it, not just be this like rah, you're with us or against us energy. Oh, that's so fascinating that was 2001. Okay. I want to read some comments here. My husband said the patriotism was pushed so hard to get support for the war. That is usually what happens. Love from Canada. I am not American, but I find your content very relevant. We are very close. I am a uni student and I feel the herd mentality with my peers, and I often self-censor. Oh, thank you so much. And my heart really goes out to you, because I know the feeling. And I know that Canada has some unique struggles. Wouldn't want to be me in Canada. I might get in trouble. Though I know there are people like yourself, I'm sure, who are aware that this kind of groupthink and like conformist culture isn't healthy. It doesn't help us. I know a lot of people think that they're doing the right thing when they create these environments where if you question their beliefs or if you disagree, that you get demonized because, oh, well, this is our way of pushing our good ideas. But it's so short-sighted, because the thing is, good ideas don't need conformity and groupthink and censorship to flourish. On the contrary, if they're good, they'll become better when you let them be criticized and let them be debated. And so I'm glad that there are more and more people that, despite us struggling with censoring and having to be in these environments that are uncomfortable, just knowing that it's not the way it should be, that it's not right, is good. Because what would be worse if everybody was like, yeah, this is great, conformity is good, let's keep rolling along. That would be very dystopian. I'm from the UK, and I find it so reassuring because I lost some American friends for suggesting the far left are at fault. I hate to hear that. It's never nice to lose friends, especially over politics. You know, I just think that should be one of those like hard lines where if you catch yourself saying, I'm cutting off people who otherwise have good intentions and are kind to me, and we have things in common, like common humanity, and I'm cutting them off because of politics. Politics isn't your friend. Politics is not going to call you up when you're having a hard day. Politics is not going to help you when you're sick. And much less the politicians or the ideologues that you're protecting by cutting people off over politics. It's a sign of a not healthy culture and a person that's struggling. And so I feel for you. Like, I know that that's so hard, and it feels bad because, like, you know, I have people do it in like the tiniest way, right? Like, they'll comment and be like, unfollowing. And I always get a kick out of it because I'm like, have a great day. Like, okay, good to know. But like, it's such a fascinating little gesture because it's meant to let you know that you aren't wanted, that you aren't tolerated, that you have crossed a line so intolerable that this person must remove themselves from your presence. And so there's this like little secret attempt to make you feel bad, you know? And of course, deep down, every functional human being wants to be accepted, wants to feel a sort of belonging to some group of peers, wants to feel that they are lovable. And so these ways that we weaponize that by you know, holding hostage our relationships and our connections, that like, if you're not aligned with me on this, then I'm taking away my connection from you. It's so just sad. It's sad. It's not, it doesn't help things. It doesn't make things better, because you know what? I have conversations with people that I do disagree with on politics. And then we just move on. And then we just, you know, we kind of like make the effort to keep the foundation of the relationship intact despite the disagreements on politics. But the thing is, if your worldview is that people who don't share your politics are bad people, you can't do that. Right? So it's like you have to pick one or the other. You have to pick the comfort of being able to say, the people that don't share my political view or my worldview are bad. They don't share it because they're bad people. That's why they don't share it. You get to have that, right? That safety blanket of like, the reason that people don't think like me is because they're just bad. How nice and convenient. Or you get to have relationships with people that are fulfilling and are resilient and are actually deep. You get to pick one or the other. And so I think a lot of people don't realize what they're losing when they choose the comfort of being able to demonize people they disagree with, as opposed to doing the harder thing of granting that people can disagree with you for good reasons, and the reasons are not that they're like evil. They might just see things differently than you. And I apply the same thing. Like, there's people that I don't agree with. Like, I'm not a leftist. I don't think that the leftist ideas they have are correct. But I know that they're still good people. They're just wrong about this thing, and that's okay, because I'm certainly wrong about other things. And this kind of they're bad people ideas come with extremism. So trying to keep friends from all political spectrum doesn't work. Yeah, that's the thing. It's like, I find that there's a certain, yeah, right. If you have a political ideology that like is inherently extreme in that way, it's not gonna work. You know, like that's not gonna work. So there is this kind of like pie in the sky idea of like, oh, we could all be friends across the political spectrum. Not all political ideologies lend itself to being friends and treating people well who are outside the ideology, because they view those people as a threat. It is inherent to the ideology that people who do not subscribe to the ideology be treated as a threat. And so if that is something that's inherent to the ideology, that's the choice. It's one or the other. And I think like it would be good maybe if more people knew that, if more people had that kind of framework. I mean, this stuff gets really into cult dynamics as well. Like, a lot of political ideologies function similarly to cults. And, you know, the cutting off people that are not in the cult, that is a very cult thing. And so it might be helpful if eventually we can start talking about certain political ideologies along the lines of like unhealthy cults, where you just have this red flag where it's like, wait, you're telling me that it's bad that I find common humanity, common ground, and am able to maintain relationships with people who don't share my political ideology? Wrong. Okay. I'm out. Like, that's just, hard line where we know any ideology that promotes that idea is a dangerous ideology that wants to keep you in this kind of groupthink environment. Okay, let's go down now through the study again. A related dimension, concern over how others perceive them, saw a 4.28% increase, meaning individuals increasingly reported caring about others' opinions. This change suggested that people have become more attuned to potential social consequences of their actions and opinions, driving them to prioritize fitting in over expressing unique and divergent perspectives. In other words, the study suggests that people today are more concerned with maintaining social harmony and acceptance, potentially at the expense of personal authenticity. This heightened concern may reflect broader social anxieties and an increased sensitivity to others' judgments, which are especially apparent in online spaces where feedback is instant and highly visible. The study also found a decline, albeit less steep, in people's willingness to break rules, indicating that people are less inclined to challenge norms or social expectations than 2 decades ago. This dimension captures a desire to stand out by defying conventions, sometimes a way of asserting individuality. However, responses suggest that, over time, people have become more reserved in behavior, choosing to conform to social norms rather than push boundaries. With the decline here, While the decline here was less dramatic than in other dimensions, it still reflects a shift towards greater caution and adherence to social rules, potentially motivated by a desire to avoid negative social repercussions. People's need for uniqueness is at a 20-year low, Chopik said. This effect was primarily driven by people's apprehension about sharing and defending their beliefs publicly. Although they were also declining, the desire to follow the rules and worry about others' opinions didn't decline as much as reluctance to share and defend beliefs publicly. We think the integration of social media into people's lives and its punitive consequences may be one of the causes, but we were limited in our ability to test that. Isn't that just not surprising at all? Very fascinating, but not surprising at all. And very, very odd time, because I think in some ways we are very individualistic, and there is this kind of like ethos, of like, I'm going to paint my hair blue, and I'm going to make up different pronouns, and I'm going to live in a van, and I'm going to do whatever I want. And I'm, like, there's all this kind of like what I would call a bit more superficial individuality, where we're given this range where it's okay to be super crazy. You want to shave off one side of your hair and wear crazy clothes? Yeah, go off. Don't be a conformist. But then when it's like, so I don't think actually that this law is good, and I think maybe that there's consequences, and it's like, whoa, that is too much. You're going to be punished for this. You are out of control. You're going to be demonized. Blah, blah, blah. So it's this superficial kind of nonconformity that people engage in more now, right? Like, and you see this online on social media where it's like, I'm going to do pranks. I'm going to do whatever little things. Like, I'm so quirky. I'm going to make up this little meme or whatever. But can you actually say what you think and stand by it and have that conversation? And that truly is a nonconformist act, right? That actually is a much healthier form of nonconformity than just these kind of like more superficial things where actually you are still deeply conformist when it comes to what you believe, what actions you're willing to take in service of what you believe, whether you're willing to stand by your beliefs, what rules you're willing to follow without question. So it's a really interesting thing, because I think in some ways you wouldn't look at the United States and be like, what a conformist culture. Like, there's a lot of difference in certain regards, but I think that those differences are much more superficial than we might be considering. And it's not surprising, as we've become a culture where there's less tolerance for differences of opinions, and this is treated as like a threat. This rhetoric that we heard so much of like, you're harming people by expressing a different opinion. It's violence to be silent, and things like this that conflated actual, tangible, dangerous levels of harm with the simple expression of a different opinion. It's not surprising that over time, as more and more people get online and are subjected to that kind of environment, that they don't want to deal with it. And so they just stay quiet. And so now we're going to get into the second part, right? So we've discussed the study that says Americans are becoming more conformist. And I highly doubt any of us are surprised. And so, so what do we do with this information now, besides be like, I knew it. I saw this coming. I felt it coming. I think that this, to me, is in some regards a wake-up call, an opportunity, a reminder to live in your values. I mean, you look at this kind of study and you could really only have two broad reactions, which is, no, this is good. This is fine. We need conformity. You know what? Those people that are non-conforming, what do they want to say? What is it that they want to say so bad? Probably something bad. Maybe they should feel bad about what they're saying. No, we need conformity because that's what helps us keep our culture together. And these non-conformists, you know, a lot of them are just like crazy activists who are trying to make trouble. We don't need conformity in our culture. What we need is stronger traditional values or something. You know, like you can fall into these broad spectrums of praising a rise in conformity. I think both of those perspectives are wrong. I prefer a society where people are free to not conform in the ways that they want that doesn't harm other people. And this is why we get into such a problem when ideologies like modern leftism conflate differences of opinion with harm. Because now we have to rehash the whole discussion of like, okay, what does it actually mean to make choices for yourself that don't harm others? So if I can't even express my own opinion on social media without being told you're harming others, what decisions can I truly make that are sovereign to myself, that I have a right to make, that don't harm others yet? And so the reality is that this kind of like expansion of the idea of harm as being like, I'm harmed, I read an opinion I don't like, is not real. And it's very dangerous to a society, because the logical conclusion of that is that we all have to accept a singular ideology. We all have to be in lockstep with each other, or else what? We're all doing harm. So, and that's just, it's not even that that's just bad. It's also that it's impossible. That's also the thing about like that kind of ideology. It's not just harmful. It's not possible. It's not possible to live in a society where everybody agrees and everybody makes the same good decisions. It's not possible. Sounds great if it was. It's not possible. And so what do we do now? So I started a publication called The Black Sheep about a year ago. And the reason I started this publication was because I already saw these trends in conformity. I was a victim of them. I very much dealt with self-censorship. I very much dealt with this sense of like, I need to pick the right opinions and express the right opinions so that I don't get trampled online, so that I can have the career I want and like blend into these people that seem to completely attack and be intolerant of anyone that expresses a different opinion than them. I didn't realize there was another way. And soon I found out that no, not only is there another way to live, a way of non-conforming to these beliefs that are popular at the time, or at least they seemed popular, it's good for me. It's good for society. And so there's a concept of moral courage. And I believe it is the psychoanalyst, Rollo May, who wrote about these different types of courage, but one of them is moral courage. And moral courage is exactly what is lacking in this study. So the facet that they described in the study that people were most changed in their opinions on over the last 20 years was the willingness to stand by your beliefs in public. That is moral courage. The willingness to stand by your beliefs, your morals, publicly requires moral courage. And I will save this live stream. Thank you. That makes me so happy. And so moral courage is exactly that. And I think, very much based on my own journey, we don't often know what moral courage is intellectually. It's something we learn. And when I was younger and kind of like growing up in this new social media environment where it was like so clear that there was all this social pressure, and it was so obvious that if I went against what was like the dogma on social media at the time, that I would be harassed. Like people would dox you. They would just endlessly insult you publicly. It's just like, no one wants to go through that, much less like someone that's barely out of their teens. Your brain is still like, oh my gosh, like I won't survive this. And so for me, it was just like, okay, I've got to blend in. I've got to conform. Obviously, it's not that conscious. It wasn't like I was like, I'm going to conform. It was just this innate sense of, to get what I want, I need to fit into this ecosystem. Now, the problem is that I didn't really know what I wanted. I thought what I wanted was to avoid conflict, was to avoid discomfort. But that actually is not a fulfilling life. A fulfilling life is one that has moral courage, where you know what you believe and you are willing to face conflict and discomfort in service of what you believe. And so I imagine that a lot of people that, answered in this study, that they have this decline in their willingness to stand for their beliefs, probably are going through the same experience I did, which is not having a very clear sense of what it is they actually believe, and perhaps just wanting to primarily avoid conflict and discomfort. And so they are less willing to engage in moral courage. And so the question then is, well, how do we get this idea to people? How do we help people realize that it's worth it? Not only is it worth it to stand by your beliefs publicly and perhaps deal with the conflict and the discomfort that comes with that, it is your duty. And I use that word very intentionally because it is your duty as someone that wants to live in a free society. It is your duty as someone who cares about the freedom of others, for them to be able to live the life that they want. If we care about these things, then we need to be people, vectors of the things we care about. With our actions, we need to support the growth of the things we want more of. And so if we choose instead to self-censor and to not stand by our beliefs just because it's uncomfortable, it's gonna take some risk perhaps, then we are vectors of that which we don't want, which is a conformist society, which is a society where people must hide who they actually are, what they actually believe, to be safe, to have a livelihood. And I don't think anybody really wants that. I think that's something that like you have to be in a kind of dark place to justify, yeah, I want most people to live in an environment where they are constantly having to hide what they genuinely believe. And I'm not saying, oh, the opposite of that is everyone believes what they want, the worst terrible beliefs, no criticism, no pushback, let everybody do what they want. That's not the other side of a conformist society. It never was. On the contrary, when we had a culture that was more resilient in terms of expressing differences of opinion and actually engaging with the debate between those ideas, not with demonizing the people who are holding those ideas, we got better as a society. I mean, we are better off now than we were like 300 years ago. I'd say we're more evolved, more progressive, more advanced in many ways. I think there's many successes that have come through the process of free people freely engaging in debate over the span of centuries. This is how we refine our ideas. It's like that's how we do it as an individual too. The best way to learn something is to disagree about it, to like play devil's advocate, you know, to engage in that kind of disagreement. It really shows you, do you know what you're talking about? And do you know the other person's argument, or are you just making up a straw man? Let them tell you what they actually think instead of making up, no, they're just full of hate. That's all. That's all it is. Or they're just stupid. That's what we do now. Now it's like, oh, all those tens of millions of people who disagree with me on this thing, they're all stupid. They're just all hateful. That's it. That doesn't make you better. You know, that's not an actually strong argument, and it doesn't help your argument become stronger and more convincing. If you really want to convince people of your ideas, make your argument well, make it strong. Don't make it by saying anybody that opposes this is just an idiot. That's all. That's it. You don't get it? You're stupid. The end. Like, that doesn't convince anybody. But that's the thing. People who do that often aren't interested in convincing people. They are often the type that thinks they should just be able to force ideas on people. They shouldn't have to convince you. They shouldn't have to show you that the idea is good through actually explaining and debating it. You should simply be forced to accept this idea. And so we don't want that. We don't want that kind of society. And so that is why I say it is a kind of duty to exemplify the alternative, which is, I don't quite agree with that. I have a different perspective on it. Would you like to hear it? That's it. That's it. Doesn't have to be crazy. And that's something that I'm trying to do more of. When I find myself in situations where people feel very comfortable demonizing the people that disagree with them on something. And whether I disagree with them or not, I try to bring it back to the actual debate. Like, okay, yeah, I could see how you might think that, but do you think they might have some other reasons? I wonder if they care about this. You know, a lot of people, like, if they're concerned about this politician or whatever, it might be because they think maybe they won't be able to afford caring for their family and living the life they want to live. You know, I'm sure some people are stupid, but there's probably not tens of millions of people who are just stupid for voting different. They might have reasons. What do you think those reasons might be? You know, like bringing it to that actual place of, let's have the discussion. Don't just tell me you think everybody that disagrees with you is stupid or full of hate, because then you don't have to make your argument. And so it is a cop-out for you. And that is not convincing to me. And I think that when we embody the alternative to that by taking it to the place of, let's talk about it. What might be a reason why someone disagrees with you or whatever? When we take it to that place, we are being vectors of what we actually want in a society, which is not this kind of conformist culture where people just bite their tongue because they don't want to take a stand, because they don't see what's worth taking a stand for. That's very much what my problem was when I was younger. All I saw was the consequences, the negative consequences. And so it was like, why? Like, I'm just gonna do the easier thing. Now I realize the easier thing comes with a much higher cost. It's just spread out over a longer time frame. And one of those higher costs is that you live an inauthentic life. And I know that word gets thrown around a lot, like, oh, I just want to be authentic. You know, it's just like, it has this woo feeling to it. But I think a good way to think of authenticity is honesty. I think it's being a person who is real, who is in touch with reality, who is acting real. And it's so funny. It's like, I always think of like how it's this colloquial slang to just be like, keep it real, be real. And there's so much wisdom in this slang, because that really is what it is. It's don't lie, don't put up a front, don't hide behind a persona, say what you actually think, say what you actually need, and let's find a way. Be real. And so when we have a culture that's becoming increasingly conformist, we're not keeping it real. We're literally not keeping it real. And I'm like, it's funny and it's also deeply tragic at the same time, because that little wisdom there, we gotta keep it real. We're not keeping it real. It blows my mind that we're not keeping it real as a culture. Make America keep it real again. You know, that's what we need. And so let's talk a little bit about where the black sheep comes in with this, because like I said, I started this publication because I came upon this concept of the black sheep, and it instantly resonated with me because I was just like, oh, that's what I am. It all makes sense. No wonder I don't feel comfortable constantly in like groups of people that all want to agree on everything. No wonder I feel bad when I want to say what I want to say and people are weirded out because I'm not just being like, yeah, that sounds nice. And I'm like, well, wait, what about this? What about that? What if we thought this? You know, I like the ideas. I want to get to the meat of the discussion. I want to know what's true. I want to know what is actually happening here. Like, let's take it to another level. You know, I don't like that kind of, yeah, okay, all right, you think that, that's nice. I think, okay, yeah, I think that too, sure. You know, where it's just like, it's just very surface level and we're not keeping it real. We're not keeping it real. And it's not like I'm demonizing small talk, and it's not like everybody needs to throw every skeleton out in their conversation in the elevator with their neighbor. It's none of this. It's just more, when you have that opportunity to be genuine, to say something that you really care about and that you perceive that this could be something of use, like we could have a real discussion here. It's really a decision between, are you going to hide yourself, or are you going to attempt to connect more authentically, more genuinely? And this is a concept in psychology, which is that it's akin to saying every action is either one of disconnection or connection. You're either taking a step towards people, you're either opening yourself, or you're either taking a step away. You're closing yourself. And these are the things that every person as an individual has to sort out for themselves. You know, somebody's funeral is not the right time to tell the mother, you know what, I never really liked him. That's, you know, I hate that I have to say this, but I feel like I've got to make that clause because so often someone says, well, we don't want to always be authentic. And it's like, could it be authentic to put someone's grief ahead of your opinions? Could it be authentic to be considerate of someone's fragile emotional state instead of your dislike for their opinion on some lesser political matter? You see, that's the process of social filtering rather than self-censorship. And I think we get this confused a lot. I see this confused a lot. And it's a really artful process. Like, it's a really delicate thing to tread that balance, because so often it's easier to go to one extreme or the other. For some people, it's very easy to just like let it all out all the time, say whatever they're thinking, whenever they're thinking it, and just toss it all out. Let you figure it out. You can sort it out. And that's not fair to other people, because they're not your receptacles for every single thought and emotion you have. And they deserve some time to give their thoughts and their emotions. And so if you're not willing to take on all of that from them, don't throw it on them. So there's very much like this like reciprocal dance that has to happen in order for us to exchange ideas in an authentic and also constructive way. But I think we could try, I think we could try to do that. And so that's what I'm trying to do. And so that's very much what everybody at the Black Sheep is trying to do. I started this publication because I realized that my choice to be honest, when it would be easier for me to just keep my opinions and my perspective to myself, is so often an act of growth, both for me and one that is collectively impactful. Because you know what? It doesn't help people to let them stay in an echo chamber. And I've had these situations where people want to rant to me about some very misinformed opinion, simply assuming that I hold the same misinformed opinion and would discuss it in the same like hyperbolic way. when that's absolutely not the case. And the fact that they think that's the case speaks to me that they are in an echo chamber where they don't really conceive of the fact that people think differently than you. And they're not just the weird, evil people that, oh, of course you'll be able to know which ones they are. You won't come up to them and tell them your opinion. Normal people that you think are very nice, your neighbors, may have these differences of opinions that you think are intolerable and only the worst people would have because you're in an echo chamber. And so is it really the compassionate thing to bite your tongue when you have an opportunity to be a representative to someone of the fact that their worldview is very narrow and that perhaps they might consider opening it just a little to account for the fact that you don't fit in it? It doesn't have to be this grand thing. It can simply be, yeah, I don't know. I don't think that way. I think maybe there's a little more complication to that. What do you think of this? It's simply the introduction of complexity, the introduction of another perspective. And I think we do a service to ourselves, to the person we're engaging in conversation with, and to our culture when we make that effort, right? Whether it's to speak up and be a little more honest, or to not bite our tongue completely and self-censor and take the easy way out, and to moderate in that way. I think that's really a healthy thing for our culture. And so when I look at this study that tells us we are just increasingly becoming more conformist, what I think is this is an opportunity for the black sheep among us, because if you are that kind of person that's like, yeah, I really don't want to just go along to get along. I really want to speak honestly, and it's not coming from a place of hate or from wanting to speak over other people. I just want to be able to say what I think because I want to have the real conversation. And this is the kind of crazy thing. It's like, it's always about having the real conversation. And this is what I think we've lost. We've lost it because of the increase of conformity, but we've also lost it because it's been demonized. Having the real conversation has been demonized when people say, I don't talk with anybody who is a transphobe. And it's just someone being like, hey, I don't know, this bathroom situation is kind of complicated. I feel like I'm concerned because XYZ. What would be how can we bridge this gap? You know, the correct answer there, the real conversation is not, I don't speak to transphobes. The real conversation is, well, I don't think you should be afraid because I think that you are telling trans people that they're all criminals, and that's not true. So what do you think about that? And then the other person can respond and say, well, it's not that I think all trans people are criminals, but I think couldn't some people who are criminals exploit this to enter women's bathrooms where there might be people who are more vulnerable or more afraid or whatever, and wouldn't that cause a safety problem? And then the other person could respond in turn and say, yeah, I can see how that could happen, but I don't think it's fair to put the burden on trans people for the few criminals that might exploit this. That's the real conversation, right? Like, that's actually the conversation that needs to happen. And it doesn't happen because what happens instead is you're a transphobe, you're a hateful person, you're a bigot, whatever, and I don't have conversations with bigots like this, and just shuts down, and like, I'm gonna have my followers insult you, and I'm gonna make fun of you, and that is all a bunch of ways to deflect from having the real conversation. And that is a tragedy on so many levels for our culture, for us as individuals, for the topics that we cannot find truth in, that we cannot make progress on because we refuse to have the real conversation. And so when I talk about the black sheep, I talk about this symbol essentially that represents the person who wants to have the real conversation. So it's the individual in a group who is not quite in lockstep with the group, although they're somewhat a part of the group. And they have a different perspective on what the group should do. And in a healthy group, that black sheep is able to introduce that perspective and say, I know that we're all saying we should go back to the same pasture that we went to as sheep, but I'm pretty sure if we went to a different pasture, it would be greener because we hadn't been there. Now, I don't know where that different pasture is, but we could look for it. If the group is unhealthy, they demonize this person as, you're just trying to control the group, you are crazy, you're conspiracy theories, why would we ever go to a different pasture? This pasture has always been fine, you're lying, you're spreading misinformation about the pasture. They find all the different ways to just shut down the opinion, as opposed to engage with and say, well, you want to go to a different pasture because it might be better. That may be true, but wouldn't we face risks if we went to a different pasture? We'd have to travel. We have the little lambs. Can the lambs go with us to the different pasture? Is this too far away? At what point would we turn back and say, no, we've been looking for too long, let's go back to the old pasture? The real conversation, right? And so that is a healthy group. A healthy group actually engages with its black sheep. And that's the function of the black sheep, is to offer that different perspective that the group itself may not be prepared or simply has not realized that there's a different perspective. And so if the group demonizes the black sheep, then they lose out on that ability to grow, to avoid stagnation by having that other perspective to challenge what is the dominant perspective. And so I realized what I always thought was kind of like me being an outcast, where I'm like, just don't fit in, where it's like, man, why is it that everybody seems to get uncomfortable when I want to disagree about something? Why is it that I can't really find people who I can have a discussion with and really get to the truth of the discussion without it getting heated and like them getting mad? Why can't I just agree with everybody? Why do I seem to have all these different ideas that it doesn't seem like other people have? Wouldn't it be easier if I just thought like most people and didn't think secretly behind the scenes, I don't know about this BLM thing. This is starting to look a little wonky. I'm seeing people defend looting. Why would they defend looting? That just seems obviously not helpful to anybody. I don't want to say this because I don't see anybody else saying this. Like, that was my black sheep experience, where I felt like this heavy burden because I didn't think like other people. And it was putting me in this really uncomfortable position where, what do I do now? Do I say what I think and deal with what is potentially an incredibly unpleasant backlash to that? And for what? What am I going to get from that? Why would I even do that? But then being just tortured by the thoughts, because it just comes back and it comes back, and it's like, oh, I see again these things, this arguments that I keep seeing. I don't see someone saying what I'm thinking. I really feel like I want to say this, but oh my gosh, no one's saying it. Maybe it's because it's wrong. Why am I going to make this risk? And so that's how you know it's something you actually need to say, is because it won't leave you alone. That's how you know that there's something there that is calling to you in particular, that perhaps you have some insight. And in a healthy culture, you can express that insight. And perhaps it isn't quite correct. Maybe it's straight up wrong. The consequence of a wrong opinion expressed on the internet or expressed in a conversation shouldn't be so high that it makes people not want to even risk expressing an opinion on fairly normal subjects, like things that are happening in the entire culture. You know, if I can't comment on things that are in the news without feeling like it's going to risk my job or my mental health, that's not good. That is way too big of a circle of things that I'm not allowed to comment on. It's one thing that we can say, okay, we can imagine some subjects where it's just taboo. You know, there's always going to be taboos. Now, of course, this is what academia is for. There are, in a healthy society, places where taboo discussions are respected as explorations of ideas. And the whole like, no, you're a bad person, you can't have that discussion, that's left at the door. because it's understood that we're going to figure this thing out. And maybe I'm wrong, but I'm going to figure it out by asking the questions and making the arguments and having the discussions. And this is the zone where we're doing that, okay? And so if we don't even have a zone where we can do that, we don't have a good culture of seeking truth. We don't have an intellectual culture, because that's really what intellectualism is. It's a space in which you are free to engage with ideas purely with the goal of seeking the truth, not with the goal of coming out with the most palatable, acceptable, perhaps even moral answer. It's what is true. Sometimes what is true is not actually very pleasant or isn't even perhaps ethical. Maybe you don't act on the truth. I don't know. I have to think of a situation for this. But it's about seeking that information. You can figure out what you do later, but you have to have that space to seek out the information. And that's shrinking. That kind of space is shrinking more and more in our society. And so what I see is this opportunity for people that have that kind of black sheep inclination where they really do care more about having the real conversation, about genuine self-expression, genuine truth and understanding, than they do about keeping the peace, going along to get along, not offending people, not facing some unpleasant backlash for their ideas. I mean, listen, it's not like, let me put to rest the idea that I have like some, spine of steel, that I don't get upset when people come after me or whatever. I am particularly sensitive to those things. I'm just more sensitive to a life lived biting my tongue. And so it's just one hard choice or the other. But what I've learned is that the choice to not censor myself is more fulfilling in the long run. And it's actually better for me and my society. And so this is the opportunity that our culture is presented with when we see this increase in self-censorship. Now is the time for people that have that inclination to be the one person in the room that says, I don't think that's the only way to think about it. There might be another argument. Let me try to make it. Do you mind if I make an opposing argument to that idea? Like, be that one person, because I swear that person is so powerful. That person, you might not know it in the moment, and you often won't, because people are like floored and they're all fucking nervous because they're like, oh my God, this person's actually saying what they think. This person's actually challenging the dogma that nobody is supposed to challenge. So everybody else is going to be on edge. Like, that's not what we're supposed to do. But when everybody leaves, everybody goes home and time goes by, there's going to be at least one person that's like, I thought that was really cool that person actually said what they thought and introduced a different perspective. I might do that. And that is how you change the culture. Like, I swear to God, I know it sounds cliche. I know it's like Gandhi, be the change you want to be, but that's why he said it. Because it's true. It's true. What else are you going to do? What is the other alternative? That's the other thing. Like, what is the other alternative? To not do it? Okay, well then you live a sad, miserable life where you have never taken a stand for anything that you value, and you don't use all the opportunities that you're surrounded with to be a vector for positive change. You know, what really is the alternative here? So that is the opportunity that we're presented with. It is a time for moral courage. And I recommend Rollo May. I can't remember what is it? I think the book's called The Courage to Create. Yeah, I wrote some essays on it forever ago. I don't even know where they are, honestly. But if you look up the book, The Courage to Create by Rollo May, it is a very short book. I think that I did a live stream with Africa Brooke on this book, actually. I think you can probably find that in her podcast or on my page. We discuss it because it has multiple different kinds of courage. I can't remember any of the other types of courage now, but moral courage is one of them. And I think creative courage was one of them. And that was actually what I was more focused on at the time, because I was seeing how this culture of censorship, self-censorship, and this culture of conformity was killing art. Because you have this culture now where it's like everybody's looking for ways to point out that you have offended them and that you're secretly a bad person, that you're secretly a Nazi, like as if that's the thing now, like, right? Like the spectrum of people, like what it takes to become a Nazi now is so little. It's incredible. Like you are just one wrong opinion away, one disagreement away from being a full-fledged Nazi now. That's the level of tolerance for disagreement that we currently have in our culture. And so I remember I was looking into creative courage as a concept because I realized, you know, the role of a truly great artist in a culture that is becoming increasingly conformist and cowardly is to do the opposite, is to live the opposite, to show what it is to be a person that lives in courage and lives freely, not concerned with the opinions of others as like the primary determinant of how they're going to make their decisions in life. And so that book is a great book. It's a good book to read. And what else do we have? I'm gonna wrap it up here. I'm starving to death. Let me go through some questions here. On YouTube, I have someone says, you can't change the people you disagree with. This only makes you crazy, not them. They will either be willing to hash it out or they will not. A wiser person than I gave me this piece of advice. This is very true. This is why you don't see me fighting with people on social media. I'm gay, but I ordered Chick-fil-A now, so I'm a Nazi, by the way. It's funny because like that's not even a joke. I remember the moment when it was like, you are a traitor if you order from Chick-fil-A, like do not do it. And it's like, they make good food and that's fine. Like it's fine to have their food and not be like, this is me supporting every decision that the owners of this company will ever make. Like, you will never leave your house if that's the way you live. And yes, in regards to, there are some people that are willing to have disagreements and there's some people that are not. And you're going to know those type of people. I was having a conversation with a neighbor the other day who was like very eagerly telling me how we are about to enter the dark ages because of Trump and how he is the most stupid person and every person that he has picked for his cabinet is even worse, and it is just a nightmare, a catastrophe. And I was like, oh, that's pretty intense stuff. Do you think perhaps there could be some things that are okay about his presidency? Maybe it's not going to be that bad. I mean, we did go through one and it wasn't that bad, right? So is there hope that maybe this could be okay? No, I know what's going to happen. And so like, this is the kind of person that I'm like, okay, I'm not changing your mind. But what I'm not going to do is also stand by and silently nod when you say every person that has voted for Trump is just evil and stupid. I'm not doing that because it is my duty to represent the fact that the world is more complex than that. And so I'm kind of like in that mode right now, like really taking it upon myself to be like, I don't agree. And it doesn't have to be intense. It doesn't have to be a debate. Like, I don't need to change someone's mind. What I need is to hold my own as not, being like, yes, let me help you maintain that echo chamber that you've got there. It's so nice. I'm not going to do that anymore. Because what happens is like, at the end of the day, you walk away and you kind of feel like, damn, this person just like threw all their worldview onto me, did not leave any space for my worldview, right? It was just like, here, I'm going to tell you everything about how everything is. Don't care about what you have to say unless it's in agreement with me. Then I want to hear it. Then go hot. I'm going to give you the mic. But if it's you are disagreeing with me, I'm going to talk 100 miles a minute over you. I cannot hear you. And it's like, that is not fair. Like, on a very fundamental level, that's not fair. So I'm no longer doing this thing of like, I'm just going to be, okay, because that's easier. And that is what I have done many times in the past when I'm like, I'm not trying to have a debate right now. Like, so often I'm like, can we just not, like, please just don't bring up contentious topics if you're not willing to hear the other opinion, you know, like if you're not willing to have an actual, you know, conversation, don't bring up the topic with people that you don't know what side of the issue they fall on. And so my thing is like, I'm going to just keep my space, right? Where it's like, hey, I hear you. I can see how that makes sense for you. For me personally, I think a little bit differently. But I can see how you see. It's just that. It's kind of like, not to use the very abused concept of boundaries, but it very much resembles the idea of a boundary, which is I'm not a canvas for you to throw all your worldview onto, leaving no room for me, and then using me to reinforce your worldview by assuming that I agree with you because I didn't say anything otherwise. No more. Vectors for individualism, vectors for genuine conversation, vectors for intentional nonconformity. All right, I'm going to go through the questions and the comments, and then I'm going to head out here soon because, like I said, I'm quite hungry. Yeah, right. It was like the owner that had, like the Chick-fil-A owner that was anti-gay, and it's like, well, he's very religious, I think. Like, that's their whole thing. So I don't love that, but, you know, it's like, have you ever eaten at, like, a restaurant of other people that are religious? Because I imagine, like, if I went into, like, I mean, when I was in Morocco or something, pretty sure that they have some anti-gay opinions in the restaurant that I ate in. Am I supposed to not eat in any of the restaurants? Like, do I have to agree with everything from the people that make my food? Like, it's also a weird thing because it's like, so how far are we taking that? Do I have to look up the owners of every restaurant? Are the managers culpable? Like, should I know what the managers believe too? You know, where do we draw the line there? You easily see that it's like, oh, this isn't workable. Like, this actually doesn't work. Now, of course, I'm against anti-gay legislation. I think you should leave people alone. But I don't think people should be prevented from having businesses because they have opinions I don't like. Now, I also think you can choose not to support a business if you don't like it. Awesome. Love that for you. Go ahead. Great. Boycotting stuff is great. That's fine. Don't attack other people who don't want to boycott the thing with you. That's the only thing. Like, it's a lot of these things, like activism really just lost the plot, probably around 2001 as well. But I don't know. But I remember when I was like in my baby activism stage where it was like, I'm going to do environmentalism things. And there was the zero waste movement. And so the idea was, try to make as little waste as possible. So bring your own cup to places, bring your own Tupperware to take away your leftover food from the restaurant, try to buy stuff that doesn't have packaging, things like that. And when the activists got a hold of that, the different kind of activists, the ones that are like, no, it has to be systemic change. All of this is just fake individual action, and individual action is a distraction from the real problem, which is the system. And it's like, well, how are you going to change the system if not with individual action? But that's another point. But the thing is, it is actually so disempowering to tell people that your individual actions don't matter. If you want to boycott a business or whatever, that's great. That shit works. Like, if you want to organize an actual real boycott voluntarily, as opposed to through a shaming and fear campaign where it's like, I saw you had a Chick-fil-A bag in your trash in that live stream you did, we're coming after you. Like, not like that. You know, that just creates a new problem where, okay, now we got the Chick-fil-A problem and now we got you problem too. Instead of like respecting individual action where people can make their own choices and like, hey, I want to reduce the impact on the environment. I'm going to stop making as much garbage. You can also advocate for like legislation and things like that too. But people would denigrate the individual action. It was, you think being a vegan makes a difference? You think using non-plastic things makes a difference? You're just distracting from the real problem. It's like, oh my gosh, are we committed to being miserable and ineffective, because the reality is that doesn't help. Like, you can do both. You can care about systemic level changes, and you can also do things individually and be happy about that. On the contrary, that's a better way to create that momentum towards collective change, is if you do it in your life, because then the people around you are like, oh, look at that girl. She is always bringing with her a reusable cup. Why don't I do that? That seems easy. Like, that's literally what happens. That's what happens. And to demonize that as like, oh, that's useless, that's just distracting from the real problem, it's not helpful. But that's the thing. It's like, if you scratch the surface of that kind of activism, you often find that it's because the ideology driving it inherently opposes individualism as a meaningful philosophy, which means individual action is not sacred or important. Collectivism, collective action is what is important, the greater good. And so you can't, while holding that idea of a collectivist ideology, be like, yes, individual action is great, I support it. You know, like, it's very like antithetical to ultimately the goal of a society by which individuals are subordinate to the collective. Let me go through some more questions. I keep saying, I'm out, and then I'm like, I get lost in the comments, lost in the sauce. Thank you, Solomon. All people in the comments, I had no idea how much I needed to meet you right now. That's so nice. That makes me so happy. We are here. We are not very many, but we are here. Oceans are made up of raindrops. I love it. People knew this once. I feel like that is a very Taoist, kind of like Buddhist concept even, where it's just like an understanding of us being, you know, like, this is the thing. I think people sometimes mistake my individualism for like anti-cooperation or like anti-collaboration. And it's just like, no, I just want individual rights to prevail. Ultimately, I don't want there to be a scenario where someone's like, I don't want to do what the group wants to do. I want to do my thing. And we're like, sorry, no, the group come first. Like, I don't, generally, those are not scenarios that actually help a society. Those are often the situations where the individual is the one that's like, this is a bad idea. We shouldn't do this. And the intolerance of that person going their own way is a sign that they are correct to go their own way very often. What is your political ideology, or what ideology most closely captures you? So technically, I'm an anarcho-capitalist, which is, I believe that the government is not necessary, and I believe that the free market is necessary. So I know that that is unlikely to ever materialize in my life. That's not my reason for believing in it. It's more based on principles that I believe people should be free ultimately to dictate the direction of their lives, and people should be free to make the choices that they want to make. So whether that's economically, in terms of starting a business, in terms of buying from a business, or whether that's personally, in terms of their religion, the lifestyle they want to live, these things. As long as they're not infringing on the freedom of others to do the same, it's not my business. And so I am, normally I just say I'm a libertarian because that's more palatable and doesn't require as in-depth of an explanation, and it's based on the same principles, which is one of the main principles being the non-aggression principle, which is I reject the use of force in all circumstances unless it is in the protection of a person's individual freedoms being violated, right? So you have the freedom to use force to defend yourself so that you can keep living and live your free life. You do not have the freedom to go into someone else's house and use force and take their belongings so that they cannot live their free life. And so my main inclination is a lessening of the power of federal government over our lives. I'm inclined to encourage people more to focus on local government, because I think that's also just more aligned with our brains. Like, we understand the idea of local government and things happening on a local level more intuitively, because that's how we've always been evolved. The idea that there's like this mass of people somewhere far off who are making decisions for all hundreds and hundreds of millions of us in the country who are very different, live in different places, have different lifestyles, have different beliefs, have different needs. You know, it makes us insane because it doesn't work, because we're very different. So the way to solve that is to say, hey, California, you want to live the way you live, where you have the combination Pizza Hut, Planned Parenthood, and where weed is free on every corner, and where the healthcare is free and your taxes are crazy, and the crackheads are all on the beach hanging out alongside the toddlers. You do you. That's you. And I'm not going to take that from you. Love California, but I have to criticize California because I love it. And you, Kansas, you want to live in a weird church state where everybody is like living like they're in The Handmaid's Tale? You do you. That's you. Okay. Now let people leave. If they want to leave, let them leave. That's the thing. That's kind of like the original American project, is like, you know what? Those people in that state, they really like their religion. They're trying to be real serious about their religion. These people in this state, they care a lot more about business. They seem to want to do business. They don't mind who comes into the state and does business. They're different. Let them run their different states to their tastes. And so for the most part, that helps to bring the temperature down on things, because when you have this kind of situation where people feel like those people over there who are super different from me and I really don't like are going to get to decide how I live my life, that is just a recipe for problems. It's a recipe for problems. And so if we have the situation where people have more of a sense of like, you know what, I really hate what they're doing in Florida. I think that's a terrible way to live. But I don't live there. I live in New York, and I like how we're living in New York. Okay, great. Everybody's happy. You know, like, it's just the more freedom we can give people to live the lives that they want, the less conflict we have. And the history bears that out. And so that is the majority of my philosophy. Let me look at some comments and then I'm out of here. Do you ever get so hungry where you can smell the food that you're going to cook? I don't know if that's me being crazy, but I swear that I smell the food I'm about to eat. By the way, I don't know if you care for this input, but your logos and text on the bottom for your other sites are too small to read on both desktop and IG and phone IG. Thank you. I do care for that input. Okay, that makes sense. As I'm looking at it now, it is pretty small. All right, guys, I'm going to wrap it up. Please do go to wetheblacksheep.com. That is where I'm going to have this study linked. I'm going to place it as a comment on the post that I did promoting the live stream. And I will be doing this live stream several times a week. You can see that post for the schedule. And we are publishing lots of great things about people who have left behind groupthink, who are making the choice to not bite their tongue and pick conformity and ease as opposed to standing up for what they believe in. And those stories are really inspiring. They can give you this sense of like, okay, that's why you make the harder choice. A lot of different examples of people doing that, and as well as like some black sheep opinions. This is the thing. I actually think there's value in listening to those fringe opinions as long as they have reasons and they can actually articulate the logic behind them. All right, let me hear your crazy argument for why actually we are all one consciousness interacting with itself. Like, let me hear your crazy opinion for why whatever, like, bring it on. That's how we learn and that's how we grow. And so I want to foster that culture there. And I would love if people who feel that resonates with them would go to wetheblacksheep.com, subscribe, particularly if you would be so generous as to donate to the Black Sheep, to subscribe with a paid subscription. This helps me to spend the time reading research papers and putting on this 2-hour show. Have we been here for 2 hours? I think we've been here for 2 hours, which I love, but I'm very hungry and I'm very tired. And so if you want to help support this work, I would love that. So thank you all for joining in. This was so great. I really, really enjoyed hearing from you guys and your experiences. It's just always so nice to kind of like coalesce with some people. It's like, okay, I'm not crazy. Y'all see it too. We're kind of working through the same things, and that is great. I want to answer this question about libertarianism, but I'm so tired. At what point do states' rights go too far? Would it be okay to bring back Jim Crow laws if a state wanted? I know you're ending. No. See, that's the thing. That would violate the non-aggression principle. So that would be violence. Like, that would be aggression towards a person, and that would violate their individual sovereignty. So I think it's like tiers, right? It's like, okay, let's reduce the power of the federal government. Let's have people care more and like interact more with their state level governments, but then also keep pushing for individual rights and sovereignty at the state level too. The thing is, I just think more of the battles should happen at the state level because it's more productive if they happen at the state level. Because like, why am I fighting with Californians about how people in the entire country should live? Like, let them just figure it out over there, and let the people who live in North Dakota figure it out over there, instead of everybody feeling like, oh my gosh, like that part of the country is going to get to decide how I live for the next 4 years. It's just, you see how it makes people crazy also. Like, people get so unwell during the election, and like I'm not talking to my grandma because she voted for this person, and like, it's not healthy. And so the more we can bring the temperature down on that and reduce the feeling of people I don't know and don't agree with are going to have control over my life, the healthier and more peaceful we can be. And so then you bring those discussions, right? Like, a lot of people were concerned about abortion legislation from this election. Well, Trump is on record saying, I will not ban abortion at the national level. I'm very happy with that. I find that satisfactory, because I live in a place that is not going to ban abortion. So that works for me. Now, of course, if you're a person that's like, no, I want abortion as a right, I think it's good, but I live in a state that is very, very conservative. Okay, that's your battle though. Like, take the battle to that conservative state, right? So then it's not the places where there really is a majority of people who do not want abortion. Okay, like, at what point do we trust the democratic process of like, okay, 80% of the people in Arkansas do not want abortions past this date, or they don't want abortions at all. Okay, it's Arkansas. It's very conservative. It's likely that most people are going to agree on certain conservative tenets, and they're going to have those enacted in government through their voting process. Maybe that's not my preference, but at some point we got to have some give and take. Now, personally, I don't think that there should even be state laws against abortion, at least not in a very restrictive manner. I think there should be some level of abortion allowed, because it's, to me, an issue of individual sovereignty. And so my thing is not like, hey, that's your problem, whatever. But rather, the battle has to happen at the state level, because it's more productive there, because then you're actually engaging with the people in your state. Those are the people that you're going to live with. They're actually deciding what we're going to do as a state, as a community. I mean, I would love to take it even smaller, where even the state laws are not that impactful upon people living in the state, but it's more local governance, the counties, that is more impactful, because then you really can have locations that are more tailored to what people want, and you reduce the conflict and the temperature around that conflict when people can work literally side by side. In that case, like, if it's people that live in the same community, they're going to tend to have more of the same opinions also. So there's going to be a much easier way for them to find a compromise that satisfies most of the people in that scenario. And so that's my thing. Like, that's a good thing to keep in mind, is that like non-aggression principle. It's like, we're not saying that as long as it's a state law, you can make any law you want. No, it's just that it's more productive to have those discussions at the state level. I think like we're not meant to be having these national debates. This is so new, and it's very much mediated by technology, like very new technology that has allowed us to debate with people that live on the other side of the country and like see in real time what's going on over there, what's going on over here. They're gonna make us live like that. I don't want to live like that. It's normally it was like we're just in our little community. I heard that the president gave out some State of the Union, whatever. I don't know about that, but things are going well here. I'm quite happy with that. I got my governor. I got my, it's more in our realm of influence, which is a little more aligned with our evolutionary history of accounting more for the things that are in our actual influence, not things that are vastly outside our influence in places that we don't live with people that we don't know. So that's my argument for why it's better to bring these kind of debates about how we want to live, what laws we want to have, down to the state level. That's why, like the thing with weed, let them decide on the states. Like it shouldn't be something that is being mandated federally. And the fact that it still is a problem, because I know that they just use this to like run random busts when it's legal in the state because it's illegal federally. And it's really just, it's like, let the people in that community, in that region, decide what works for them. We have different cultures in different parts of the country. It's really crazy to think about. Like the United States is huge. So the culture in California is a very different culture from the one in Oklahoma, and is a very different culture from the one in Georgia, and is a very different culture from the one in Massachusetts. And we should respect that in a way. It's like when you're trying to make people that are very different all kind of like agree or like have to live, one picks how everybody's going to live this time, the other one picks how everybody's going to live the next time. We don't need to do that. Why are we doing that? I don't like it. So anyway, let's wrap it up here, because now I'm starting to be in physical pain. I don't want Florida voting on California voting on a federal law that can affect Florida. Absolutely not. And I'm sure they don't want my Floridian vote to affect them either. That's exactly it. Found you via your poetic critique of Destiny on X a while ago. Oh my gosh, that's awesome. That's such a funny way to find me. I love that. Thank you. As someone from a smaller country, this is a huge insight into the USA alone. It is a crazy big country. And it's one of the things that's really cool in a way, but it's become a problem because we've got this like hyper focus on the federal government, like the national government, as the thing that's going to really be the main influence in how we live. And it just really doesn't need to be like this. Like you could have some main federal laws where it's like, don't have slaves or something. It's like, okay, we can all agree on that. But really that shouldn't be something that needs to be set at the federal level anyway. But this is the thing. It's like, when you start to get down to the nuances that deal with people's culture and their religious beliefs and things like this, where it's like they have different lifestyles, like they have different industries in different states, they have vastly different populations, like literally different cultures. I mean, like Florida and the north part of Florida and the south part of Florida, people joke that it's like South Florida is North South America, basically, because it's so different culturally. And so thinking that like one blanket law is going to fit for everybody, it is not. It's not working. We can see that. Everybody's going crazy. Okay, that's it. I am out of here because I am starving. All right. Thank you guys so much for joining in. I had so much fun talking to you all. This was great. And join me over at the Black Sheep. And stay tuned because I will announce when I do my next live stream. And I will post this soon. And feel free to leave comments on it afterwards if you have any ideas for what you would like me to discuss in some of the upcoming Black Sheep live streams like this, because that would be really fun. And yeah, that's that. Now let me see if I can figure out how to end this thing because I got a fancy software. Shout out to my fiance Jake for getting all that software working. All right, I'm out of here. I found the right button and I'm gonna press it. Good night, guys. Bye. Thanks for joining.